Risk of Rain is a pretty special game to me. It was my first real exposure to the roguelike genre, and to this day I think it's one of the best. It's got good characters, solid run customization options, a great atmosphere, and a phenomenal soundtrack. I thought it might have just been nostalgia, rose-tinted glasses making me remember it better than it actually was, but I revisited it recently to unlock a couple items I never got back in the day. Alright, there we go. Coming in from the top rope! And yeah, I'd say it holds up pretty well. It's a little clunky at times, but I still think it's a great game, so when they announced Risk of Rain Returns, a full remake, you might be surprised to hear that I wasn't fully on board right away. I have a bit of a problem with remakes and remasters, and it's that only games that are already good get them. Just slap new textures on a game that already looked good, and maybe a new mechanic. Boom, $60 please. Not to say that they can't be good, here's a few great ones, but I feel like games that had good ideas but came out a bit undercooked are more deserving of remakes, a second chance to see what could have been. But those would sell way less, so I don't blame companies for sticking to the safer option. All this to say, yeah, I wasn't exactly sold on Risk of Rain Returns right away. I have a lot of problems with Risk of Rain 2, but I respect the hell out of the devs for taking a totally new direction with the IP. That kind of experimentation is always interesting, and it paid off big time. The amount of attention the sequel got was just insane, mostly due to its great multiplayer. I prefer the first game, but it's hard to convince your friends to screw around with Hamachi for Risk of Rain 1 when 2 has all that multiplayer stuff built in. So I initially thought that's all I would use Risk of Rain Returns for, a way to convince my friends who only ever played the sequel to try out the original. Though the trailer was very impressive, amazing animation all around and whoa, wait, hold up, go back. This is where my expectations changed. Artificer wasn't in Risk of Rain 1, so this confirmed that they would be adding content from the sequel to Returns, and during the build-up to release they announced plenty more. New items, characters, enemies, mechanics. This was looking to be far more than just a fresh coat of paint, and now that it's here, let's see if it delivered. I'll start with the obvious. The presentation is a huge improvement to the original. The sprite work overall just looks amazing. It's some of the best I've seen from a roguelike since they usually emphasize their gameplay over visuals. But Risk of Rain Returns knocks it out of the park. Everything has been lovingly recreated in far higher quality, and it lets you see details that couldn't be drawn on the original. With the first game, the sprites are pretty vague. You can't really tell what you're looking at half the time. I remember when I was younger I couldn't really tell what the imps were doing when they attacked, but with the bigger sprites and smoother animation, there's a lot more visual clarity. Also, I always thought Ifrit was like a big dog or beast or something, but it looks a lot more reptilian in Returns. And I used to think the happiest mask on Scavenger's sprite was its face, at least until I got its log, but they don't even have the mask in Returns. Speaking of that, the logbook artworks in Returns are amazing. Seriously, compare these to the original, it's night and day. The stages received a huge upgrade too, far more detailed environments and backgrounds. It really steps up the atmosphere. I never actually noticed the UES contact light in the background of the temple, which is mostly just on me being stupid because it was totally there in the original, but it's much more pronounced in Returns, and it really improves the build-up to the end of the run. And the visual spectacle with the final boss is just, it's so good. I won't be showing the Providence fight, but if you played the game, you know what I'm talking about. Sound design got a huge overhaul too, it's a lot cleaner now, have a listen to Commando's gunshots. And speaking of audio, the music has all been remastered and there's a few new tracks and remixes exclusive to Returns, which is pretty cool. They could have left it untouched and I'd be happy, but the remasters sound good, and I'm glad they didn't screw it up because Risk of Rain has one of my favorite game soundtracks, period. All the new gameplay content fits in pretty well. Some items are from the sequel, reimagined for a 2D game, but it has its fair share of totally original items with unique effects. The new enemies all feel like a natural extension of the first game. Trox can borrow to reposition, Microbic predators can attack in the 4 cardinal directions, and these little guys are horrible. I hate these damn things. They're not even that dangerous of an enemy, I just can't hit them! The new survivors are pretty fun too. Pilot brings a more aerial approach to a usually grounded game, letting you glide around with your parachute and attack enemies from the skies. Drifter has a unique gauge to fill by hitting enemies or stuffing them in the bag, which she can then spend on supporting your team by creating temporary items to share with your squad. Or you can take them for yourself, you greedy bastard. And Artificer, I'm not really sure what she does actually. She's pretty gimmicky, and honestly, not very strong, so I've only played her a couple of times, but they have announced that they're gonna tweak her viability. There's a secret bonus character too, but they're behind a Noita tier puzzle, so I'm not gonna discuss them. Also, this is a minor thing, but I missed the character select being on the escape pod. I always thought that was really cool seeing all the characters lined up like this, but I'll admit the new UI is a lot more functional. Of course, new characters is exciting, but old survivors got some new tools too. Engineers' turrets now inherit items just like the second game, and Miner got a bunch of changes. They also brought over the loadout system from Risk of Rain 2, letting you pick alternate skills, which is amazing. That was like the best part of 2. Commando gets a shotgun, Enforcer gets a shield charge, Miner got a projectile, Sniper got a melee, and Mercenary can parry anything, including fall damage. Alternate colors also return, which is nice, good way to differentiate your teammates, and they make a fun unlockable. Most of the alternate skills are unlocked from the new mode, Providence Trials. These are smaller, self-contained levels with a goal you need to fulfill, usually reaching a score or doing something within a time limit. They're a bit of a mixed bag. Some are fun and genuinely creative, like sorting gups by size or racing through platforming challenges, but others are just boring or frustrating. This Castlevania homage would have been sick if the enemies didn't stun-lock you. Also, this mercenary trial is totally a DMC reference, right? You know, you're a red guy, you're fighting a blue guy, you're on a rooftop, it's raining. Is this intentional? Am I stupid for thinking this? Anyway, I think the trials are a great addition overall, because they're optional for the most part. It's a lot easier to unlock the alternate skills this way, but you can also just play the game as those characters and you'll get them eventually. Personally, I like the trials, but if you don't care, you can just ignore them and the game won't really punish you for it. Though you do miss a couple item unlocks, which is unfortunate. The gameplay is pretty close to the original, as a remake should be, but there is a fair few significant changes. Of course, there's the new items and enemies, but they also changed the teleporter, so it's always 90 seconds regardless of difficulty, and you can leave without killing all the enemies, as long as you take out the boss. The great thing about this change is that it's totally optional. You can turn off all sorts of stuff in the settings, like the new enemies and items, to bring it as close as you can to the original. But I think all the new content is great, so I haven't messed with these settings much. They also bring in some new interactables, a drone station that lets you combine 3 identical drones into one super drone, a drone shredder that turns your drones into items, and some thing that lets you spend money to activate an equipment. And a couple interactables from the sequel too, equipment barrels, which always drop equipment, and mountain shrines, which you should definitely always hit, or else you're a coward. There's a couple things they didn't bring back, notably I've seen people lamenting the lack of printers and scrappers from the second game, but I think this is for the better because they were both fucking stupid. Printers were already really strong in a vacuum, but the existence of scrappers pushed them over the edge and made them way too centralizing to the core strategy of the game. They felt more like a band-aid solution to the abundance of subpar items. By contrast, your average item in returns is a lot better, so there's only a handful of bad items, and no reason to bring back the scrappers. Yeah, this game is tough. I've seen a lot of posts saying people who only ever played the sequel are getting filtered because Risk of Rain 1 was just so much harder. Which is just wrong. I agree that 2 was a lot easier than 1, but Returns is another step up for one simple reason. The Lemurians can climb ropes now! Actually, a lot of enemies are way more mobile. Smaller enemies like Claymen and Lemurians can climb and attack on ropes, no longer making them a safe space to stall for time. And larger enemies like Parents can jump up small ledges instead of just staring dumbfounded at a slight step that's 1/5 of their height. Also, overloading enemies are run killers, but apparently their range is bigger because of a bug, so hopefully that'll get fixed by the time this video goes up. Speaking of bugs, I haven't seen that many. I've only really encountered the overloading problem, and one time I got stuck in the parry stance and couldn't get out of it. But considering I've played 40 hours, and these are all the glitches I've encountered, that's pretty damn good. It hasn't even crashed yet, which is amazing, because the original would crash when you looked at it funny. Oh, and I had a friend who died while invincible. Not really sure what happened here. I'm glad that they didn't try and rebalance the game, just kept it mostly the same. It's not identical, but all the changes make sense, like stacking Ancient Scepter now gives you a cooldown reduction instead of doing absolutely nothing. I also noticed Infusion was nerfed when being used with the Glass artifact, which is a great change because Glass Infusion was easy mode. Ceremonial Dagger still wins you the run though. Oh, and Wicked Ring gives you 5% crit rate when it used to give you 6%. Can you believe that shit? Literally unplayable, never mind, I hate this game. The multiplayer is what I was most excited for. Risk of Rain is a pretty solid series, but the only reason I have the time that I do in the games is because it's a pretty easy thing to get together and play with your mates for like an hour or two. More just something to do in the background while we chat about stuff, and occasionally riff off stuff in-game.
As far as the monsoon icon looks like the fucking pick of destiny.
It's not exactly like you have to be dialed in, hyper-focused on the game, so I'm glad to say that Risk of Rain Returns has the best multiplayer in the series. It's all handled through Steam, so creating and joining lobbies is simple and convenient, and I haven't really had any issues with desyncs or disconnects. Also, you can vote on stuff like difficulty and artifacts now instead of the host having complete control. They also have a unique solution to a series-long issue. In the other games, you die and spectate your teammates, then respawn at the next stage. Sounds good, but actually this kinda sucks because now you're behind on items, and the game has gotten harder, so there's a good chance you'll die again. It's really hard to make a comeback, and it just means one person is usually having less fun. Risk of Rain Returns attempts to remedy this issue by giving you something to do while dead. You come back as a drone that can do nothing but shoot a weak gun and pick up items. This means that your teammates can help you keep up if they're willing to share their items with you, and if you don't need the items, you can at least fly around and shoot enemies. You know, something to do rather than just sitting there. Is it a perfect solution? Not really, but it's better than anything I could think of. Also, they should really add an option to have picking up items be on a prompt. It's a problem in every game, you just walk over items to pick them up, but it's especially frustrating in a 2D environment where you can't easily maneuver around them. It makes sharing items with your team needlessly hard. Risk of Rain Returns blew me away. Is it a perfect game? No, not even close. But I would say it's a perfect remake. It's a rare case where it actually feels like I'm getting more of the creator's original vision. I feel like if they had more time, money, and development prowess, this is the game Hopoo Games would have made 10 years ago. It's an amazing recreation and expansion of what was already an instant classic, and a great way to experience Risk of Rain if you never played it back in the day. If you're a fan of the other Risk of Rain games, then yeah, play this one, and if you're just looking for a great roguelike, this is one of the best, and probably the best multiplayer one. I have no idea where the series is going after this, but I'm glad that the partnership with Gearbox at least led to this masterpiece being created. Actually, where is the series going? Oh no.